Senator John Kennedy just brought a single, worn manila folder to a Senate hearing, and within 43 minutes, it completely dismantled Representative Ilhan Omar's carefully crafted political narrative. Here is exactly how the ultimate confrontation unfolded. Some people did something. That was how Representative Ilhan Omar famously described the devastating events of September 11th, 2001. She spoke those words to a CARE audience in Woodland Hills, California, on March 23, 2019. Nearly 3,000 Americans perished that morning, yet she chose to summarize the tragedy with just 5 words. Some people did something. 5 fleeting words for 3,000 lost souls. Flash forward to the Hart Senate Office Building, hearing room 219. Just 43 minutes ago, a senator from Louisiana strolled through the heavy oak doors. He didn't bring an entourage or a stack of thick legal briefcases. He brought a single, tan manila folder. The corner of the folder was slightly bent from wear, and written in plain pencil on the tab was one solitary word: receipts. Inside this unassuming folder lay 4 neatly organized documents, each separated by a penciled tab. Document 1, money. Document 2, marriage. Document 3, Benjamins. Document 4, 3,000. The 4th document was a printed transcript of a speech, with vibrant yellow highlighter illuminating 5 specific words. Some people did something. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana brought no witnesses to this hearing simply because he didn't need any. He had the speaker's own record. If you appreciate a methodical pursuit of the truth, make sure to follow along, because in the span of the next 40 minutes, a self-described country lawyer from Madisonville, Louisiana, is going to ask Representative Ilhan Omar 4 devastating questions, and the 4th question will honor the memory of the fallen. Let us rewind the clock back 43 minutes to the precise moment. Ilhan Omar walked into Hart 219, armed with her brand new strategy. Her game plan was simple: identity politics. Unfortunately for her, that strategy would not survive the contents of the manila folder. The hearing room was grand, paneled in rich wood with high ceilings and long fluorescent lights that hummed faintly above the judicial bench. An estimated 4.8 million Americans were tuning in to watch the broadcast live. Representative Omar wore a crisp navy blazer and a white headscarf meticulously pinned at her temple. She placed her leather-bound notebook on the witness table. Concealed in her left hand, folded neatly in half, was a small white index card. It bore her own handwriting on the inside, 3 distinct lines she had hurriedly scribbled in her kitchen at 11:47 the night before, long after her staff had gone home. At this moment, she had not yet noticed the tan folder resting on the bench across from her. Senator John Kennedy sat behind the dais with the manila folder and a single styrofoam cup of cafeteria coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. He had been sitting patiently for 19 minutes without so much as cracking the folder open. The atmosphere in the room was electric, but entirely devoid of the typical polite Washington pleasantries. Representative Omar wore a smile that was sharp at the corners, openly combative. It was the seasoned smile of a politician who had marched into 8 congressional hearings over 6 years and emerged unscathed from every single one. She had proudly walked out of the Foreign Affairs Committee vote in February 2023, even after losing 218 to 211, and she had walked into Hart 219 this morning with that exact same unshakable confidence. As she bypassed the press section and the gallery, taking her seat at the witness table, she recalled the advice of the aide who had handed her a bottle of water at 8:43 a.m. The aide had warned her. The senator from Louisiana has a country lawyer reputation. People tend to underestimate him. Do not engage with his documents. Just pivot immediately to identity. She had nodded in agreement, written that very strategy on her white prep card, folded it once, and gripped it tightly in her left hand. At 8:56 a.m., the verbal sparring began. Senator from Louisiana, Omar initiated, her tone echoing the practiced cadence she utilized at Democratic Socialists' rallies. I respect every senator from every state, even the ones who represent states that did not consider me human until 1865. A ripple moved through the progressive press section. 3 reporters simultaneously jotted down a single word in their notebooks: drawing. Kennedy, however, did not take the bait. He calmly picked up his styrofoam cup, took a measured sip, and set it back down. The entire room watched the cup settle. And I would note, Senator, she continued, letting her words hang heavily in the air, that this committee is led by a man from a state whose Senate seat was held for 140 years by men who would have called me property. I have heard this script before from men who looked exactly like you. In the wings, Jeremy Slevin, Omar's communications director of 6 years, glanced down at his glowing phone. He knew this maneuver perfectly. It was the opening salvo, an identity attack launched within the first 3 minutes to establish the narrative frame. The goal was to make every subsequent question feel like a referendum on the questioner's historical biography. The progressive press section offered a quiet, approving round of applause. Kennedy waited patiently until the room fell completely silent. He set aside his coffee, retrieved his half-moon reading glasses, and let them rest on his nose, the attached chain catching the bright overhead light. Then, he finally reached for the manila folder. He did not open it yet. "Ma'am," Kennedy began, his voice dripping with the unmistakable drawl of Madisonville, Louisiana, a town north of Lake Pontchartrain and south of the Mississippi line. "My grandfather was a sharecropper in North Louisiana. He picked cotton for a man who would have called him trash, same as you." His eyes remained intensely calm behind the lenses. "But we are not here today to compare grandfathers. We are here for 4 documents." With that, he flipped the manila folder open on the bench. The broadcast cameras immediately zoomed in. The first document was now visible to millions, featuring the penciled tab reading, "Money." Stacked carefully behind it were the tabs for marriage, Benjamins, and 3,000. The hearing room grew uncomfortably quiet. Omar's grip visibly tightened on the concealed white card. Back in the wings, Jeremy Slevin's phone lit up with an urgent text message from a contact labeled DCCC. The message contained just 2 words: "Don't engage." Jeremy wisely chose not to signal Omar. Kennedy turned his attention to the first page and took another unhurried sip of coffee. $3 million, ma'am. Let's start with the money." The sound of the heavy paper turning echoed loudly in the tense silence. He didn't even look up at her. The cameras focused sharply on the Federal Election Commission filing. The header was crystal clear: Ilhan for Congress, reporting period August 2018 through September 2019. Submitted by Omar's campaign treasurer in October 2019, this exact copy had been sitting in the public FEC database for years. Beside a specific line item, Kennedy had penciled in a single note, E Street. "Ma'am, help me understand something," Kennedy requested, shifting fully into his methodical, interrogative rhythm. "Your campaign, Ilhan for Congress, which is a matter of public record between August 2018 and September 2019, paid a consulting firm called E Street Group, LLC, exactly $369,000 for consulting, travel, fundraising, and digital services." He laid the page flat, his eyes locked onto hers. "Your husband, Mr. Timothy Minette, is a co-founder of E Street Group, LLC, also public record. He has been a co-founder since the firm was incorporated in May 2017, a full 15 months before your campaign began paying it." The room held its collective breath. Omar's hand remained frozen on her prep card. "Yes or no, ma'am? Did your campaign pay E Street Group $369,000 in that period?" "Senator, the relationship between my campaign and..." "Yes or no?" 3 agonizing seconds passed. "Yes. Yes or no? In the first quarter of 2020, after you and Mr. Minette were legally married, did your campaign pay E Street Group $292,000 in just 3 months?" "Senator, all consulting payments were..." "Yes or no?" "Yes." Kennedy didn't miss a beat. "Total payments from your campaign to your husband's firm between 2018 and 2022, according to Federal Election Commission records, $3 million, ma'am." The silence was deafening. Kennedy flipped to the second page, a divorce filing from the District of Columbia Superior Court dated August 2019. Beth Minette versus Timothy Minette. "Ma'am, public record." Beth Minette, Mr. Minette's wife at the time, filed for divorce in the District of Columbia in August 2019. In her official filing, Ms. Minette alleged that her husband had confessed to her on April 7, 2019, that he was, and I quote, "romantically involved with you." Kennedy placed the document down. The cameras captured the court typeface, clearly showing the date and Beth Minette's signature. 6 days after that conversation, ma'am, your campaign began paying E Street Group, specifically for Mr. Minette's travel expenses, $21,546 over 10 weeks. Kennedy took another sip from his half-empty cup. For Mr. Minette's travel over 10 weeks, while he and his wife were in active divorce proceedings, and while you were, according to Miss Minette's legal filing, the explicit reason for the divorce. Before she could interject, he turned to a third page. It was a ruling from the Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, dated June 2019. Ma'am, yes or no, did the Minnesota Board in June 2019 fine you $500 and strictly order you to repay $3,500 back to your own campaign? Senator, yes or no? 5 seconds ticked by. Yes. For what, ma'am? Omar's eyes darted down to the table and back up. For using campaign funds for personal travel to a conference in Florida. Florida. Yes, ma'am. The board officially found your use of campaign funds for personal travel to be a direct violation of Minnesota state law. He tapped the paper. That is not a Republican investigation. That is the state of Minnesota. Omar's combative smile returned, sharper than before. She leaned into the microphone, her voice adopting a performative theatrical pitch. Senator, this is the oldest playbook in American history. A white man with a folder, a black woman with a husband, and a nation watching. She paused for dramatic effect. You are not investigating campaign finance, Senator. You are investigating my marriage because my marriage offends you. The Progressive Press section nodded in unison. A correspondent from The Atlantic frantically underlined the phrase, investigating my marriage. Kennedy simply waited. He let the silence stretch far beyond what was comfortable for anyone in the room. He picked up his cup, took a sip, and set it down precisely where it was. He lowered his half-moon glasses down his nose and peered over the rims. Ma'am, in Madisonville, Louisiana, we have a saying, if a man's wife steals his Social Security check, the question is not about the marriage. He let the metaphor sink into the room. The question is about the check. Your husband cashed $3 million in campaign checks, ma'am. $3 million. In the third row of the press gallery, a reporter from the Minnesota Star-Tribune abruptly stood up, gathered his coat and notebook, and walked out the side door. The cameras stayed fixed, but Omar noticed him leave. Her smile remained frozen, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. Kennedy turned to a fourth page, bearing the official seal of the U.S. Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control. Ma'am, one more thing on this topic. He read the name of a separate company, also co-founded by Mr. Minette. That company, last year, had its funds completely frozen by the United States Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control. Her eyes snapped up. The Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, ma'am, typically handles international sanctions, embargoes, and terrorist organizations. Yes or no, ma'am, as a sitting member of the United States Congress, did you ever bother to ask why the U.S. Treasury was freezing your husband's company's funds? Senator, my husband's separate business activities are not under my... Yes or no? 6 agonizing seconds. No. Thank you, ma'am. Kennedy smoothly slid document 1 to the back of the folder. If you find the reality of a sitting congresswoman dodging questions about frozen Treasury funds concerning, stay with us, because the next document uncovers a tangled web of marriages. Kennedy pulled forward document 2. The penciled label was unmistakable, marriage. Underneath the table, Omar's hand subtly shifted over her hidden prep card. For the first time in 40 minutes, her composure cracked just enough for the cameras to catch her grip tightening around the folded paper. Kennedy placed a Minnesota civil marriage certificate dated 2009 onto the bench. The Hennepin County seal was prominently displayed. He removed his glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them next to his coffee. Ma'am, please bear with me. I'm just a country lawyer, and the paperwork gets incredibly tangled right here. He put his glasses back on. In 2009, you filed a Minnesota civil marriage certificate in Hennepin County with a man named Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi. Mr. Elmi, according to your own public statements, was a British citizen, a matter of public record. He let the facts breathe. Yes or no, ma'am? Did you legally marry Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi in Hennepin County, Minnesota in 2009? Yes. Thank you. Kennedy flipped to a public statement Omar gave during a 2016 Star Tribune interview. Ma'am, yes or no? In 2002, did you also enter into a religious marriage with a completely different man named Ahmed Hirsi? Senator, traditional Somali marriages are not legally registered. Yes or no? 5 seconds. Yes. Yes or no? Was that religious marriage to Mr. Hersey legally dissolved before you filed the civil marriage certificate to marry Mr. Elmi in 2009? The camera zoomed in tight. Omar's eyes desperately sought out Jeremy Slevin in the wings, but Slevin's face was rigid, and he refused to make eye contact. Yes or no, ma'am? 8 excruciating seconds elapsed. The religious marriage to Mr. Hersey was not legally dissolved until 2017. Thank you, ma'am. Kennedy laid the paper down flat. So, between the years 2009 and 2017, by your own public admission, you were religiously married to Mr. Hersey and legally married to Mr. Elmi at the exact same time. The progressive reporters sat perfectly still. The room was trapped in absolute silence. Omar straightened her posture, summoning back the sharp, rallying voice of defiance. Senator, you are a Christian. You have a fleet of lawyers, you have immense wealth, and you have the United States Senate serving as your office. I am a Somali refugee who came to this country with absolutely nothing. My culture possesses different marriage traditions, and your culture clearly does not understand them. She glared at the dais. This is nothing but cultural Islamophobia, wielding a manila folder. Several reporters nodded in agreement. Kennedy simply waited. He picked up his nearly empty coffee cup, took a tiny sip, and set it down. He took his glasses off again. I grew up in Madisonville, Louisiana, ma'am. We have Catholics, Baptists, Methodists, Pentecostals, and one mosque. And in every single one of those beautiful traditions, marrying your brother is not considered a tradition. He let the devastating statement hover in the air. It is classified as a felony in every single state in the United States, including the state of Minnesota. He flipped to a highlighted copy of Minnesota Statute 609.365, incest, felony, up to 10 years in prison. He set the law down. That is not Islamophobia, ma'am. That is the Minnesota State Legislature. In the second row of the public gallery, an unidentified man in a sharp charcoal suit discreetly opened his own manila folder. It bore the official seal of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The man scribbled one definitive word on his legal pad: match. The broadcast cameras caught the moment just long enough to reveal the man's credentials: DHS investigator, special agent. Omar was oblivious to his presence, but Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina noticed immediately. Senator Scott, the sole black Republican on the Judiciary Subcommittee, sat to Kennedy's left. A veteran lawmaker with 11 years in the Senate, Scott had grown up in North Charleston, the grandson of a cotton picker and the son of a hardworking single mother. He had not uttered a single word during the hearing. When Omar cried cultural Islamophobia, Scott didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He offered her zero defense. His expression was forged from granite. The cameras lingered on his stoic face for a full second. Kennedy proceeded to a 2020 Daily Mail article featuring an explosive interview with Abdihakim Osman, a former close friend of the Omar family in Minneapolis. Reading with a slow, deliberate drawl, Kennedy recited the quote, "She told me she needed to get her brother papers. He looked up. Mr. Osman's exact words. Public record, 2020. Ma'am, yes or no, did Mr. Abdihakim Osman in 2020 publicly state that you described Mr. Elmi as your biological brother? Senator, that man has been thoroughly discredited. Yes or no, did he make the statement? 7 seconds. He made the statement, yes. Thank you. Kennedy immediately produced a stack of joint federal tax returns filed between 2013 and 2016. Ma'am, yes or no? Between 2013 and 2017, did you file joint federal tax returns? Senator, yes or no? Yes. With whom, ma'am? 6 seconds. Her eyes scoured the empty gallery before returning to the desk. With Mr. Hersey. Mr. Hersey was not your legal husband at that time, ma'am. Mr. Elmi was. The room felt as though the oxygen had been drained from it. Kennedy let the reality settle. Joint federal tax filings with a man who was not your legally recognized husband. Years of them. Omar stared intensely at her notebook. That is a severe federal tax fraud question, ma'am, entirely independent of whatever the nature of the marriage was. Kennedy then referenced a massive 2019 Washington Examiner investigation highlighting dozens of blatant discrepancies in her marriage documents, noting that the FBI had reportedly reviewed the matter in 2020. He followed this with a striking screenshot, a March 2026 podcast interview featuring Vice President J.D. Vance. Kennedy read the vice president's words into the congressional record. "We actually think that Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America." Kennedy set the paper down. "The Vice President of the United States made that statement on the record just 2 months ago, ma'am." The silence returned. "Yes or no, ma'am? Are you fully aware that the Department of Homeland Security under this current administration is actively pulling your immigration records?" "Senator, I cannot possibly speak to ongoing investigations." "Yes or no? Are you aware of the records review?" 6 seconds ticked by. "I am aware of public statements to that effect, yes." "Thank you, ma'am." Omar's grip was now so tight that the hidden white card began to crease beneath her thumb. If witnessing a sitting congresswoman confess on a hot microphone to filing joint tax returns with a man who was not her husband is shocking, wait until you hear what Document 3 contains. Kennedy gracefully slid the marriage files away and pulled out Document 3. The tab read, "Benjamins." The camera zoomed in on a printed screenshot of a deleted tweet, time-stamped February 10, 2019 at 11:17 p.m. "Ma'am, I am going to read you 5 words. They are not my words. They are your words." His country lawyer persona returned, low and incredibly slow. "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." He let the phrase hang in the room. February 10, 2019. Your verified Twitter account. Public record. He revealed a second tweet from the following morning, where a reporter had asked her exactly who was paying American politicians to support Israel. Kennedy read her one-word reply, AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Next came an older tweet from 2012, long before she entered Congress. "Ma'am, 2012, yes or no, did you tweet, and I quote, 'Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel.' 4 seconds. Yes." Kennedy took a final sip of his coffee. The cup was now essentially empty. "Ma'am, within the American Jewish community, the persistent linking of Jews and money is what we call an anti-Semitic trope." His voice dropped an entire octave, signaling the first true gloves-off moment of the hearing. "You utilized a dangerous trope, ma'am, to over 3 million followers." His stare was unyielding. "You used the exact same trope that was weaponized in Munich in 1923, in Vienna in 1897, and in Russia in 1881. Nobody moved. You used the trope that ultimately put my Jewish friends' great-grandparents into mass pits." The press section was paralyzed. Omar's knuckles turned white as the card creased further. "Senator, I have profoundly apologized for that specific tweet," she snapped, her voice tightening. "I have spent the last 6 years tirelessly building bridges with the Jewish community. This is nothing more than right-wing weaponization of a 6-year-old post to silence a Muslim woman who dares to criticize a foreign government. AIPAC is a lobbying group. I am protected by the First Amendment to criticize lobbying groups." Kennedy just waited. He stared at his empty styrofoam cup, tapped it gently, and set it aside for good. He turned to a roll call vote from February 2, 2023. On that date, the United States House of Representatives voted to strip you of your seat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The vote was 218 to 211. Yes or no, ma'am, did Speaker Nancy Pelosi in 2019 publicly and unequivocally condemn your tweets regarding Israel and AIPAC? 5 seconds. Yes. Did Representative Jerry Nadler of New York, a prominent Jewish Democrat, publicly condemn those tweets? Yes. Did the House of Representatives, in a bipartisan resolution, House Resolution 241, formally condemn those comments? 8 seconds. Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Kennedy then produced a 2024 censure resolution filed by Representative Don Bacon and co-sponsored by several others, citing her history of anti-Semitism and her repeated public characterizations of Israel as an apartheid state committing genocide. To hammer the point home, Kennedy presented a 2019 statement from Daniel B. Shapiro, former U.S. ambassador to Israel under President Barack Obama. Kennedy read Shapiro's condemnation slowly. Equating politicians' support for Israel to financial influence is the oldest anti-Semitic trope in history. Kennedy peered over his desk. That is not a Republican attack line, ma'am. That is President Obama's own chosen ambassador. Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, the senior Democrat on the subcommittee and a Jewish lawmaker with 40 years of congressional service, sat quietly. When Kennedy listed the condemnations from Pelosi and Nadler, Cardin refused to even glance at Omar. When she claimed she was building bridges with the Jewish community, his face remained carved in stone. The cameras lingered on Cardin's blatant refusal to defend his Democratic colleague. A reporter in the gallery simply wrote the word Cardin in their notebook. In the wings, Jeremy Slevin's phone vibrated violently. Another DCCC text arrived. Pull her. Jeremy made a desperate hand gesture toward the Democratic ranking member, but she shook her head slightly. There was no procedural maneuver available to call a recess before the time expired. Slevin's phone screen went completely dark. Kennedy presented the final piece of the third document, a 2019 transcript from an event at Busboys and Poets bookstore in Washington, D.C. Ma'am, I want to read from your transcript. You stated, I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. He let the words echo. Allegiance to a foreign country. Your words, your microphone, your event. Kennedy looked at her dead on. Ma'am, accusing American Jews of harboring allegiance to a foreign entity is what historians classify as the dual loyalty trope. It is the exact justification used to expel Jewish people from Spain in 1492, from England in 1290, from Russia, from Germany, and from nearly every corner of Europe over 6 centuries. He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It is the trope that logically ended in 1945, in a place called Auschwitz. The silence was suffocating. In your 6 years of alleged bridge building, ma'am, did you ever once sit down with a single Jewish constituent from Brooklyn, from Boca Raton, or from Skokie, and humbly ask them what the word allegiance means to a community whose grandparents were slaughtered for it? Senator, I have had conversations. Yes or no? 9 agonizing seconds ticked by. Omar refused to answer. If you distinctly remember the evening, an American representative casually accused Jewish Americans of purchasing their politicians. Stay tuned, because the final document in Kennedy's folder carried an unimaginable weight. Kennedy gracefully returned document 3 to the folder and withdrew document 4. The penciled label read, 3000. The cameras immediately focused on the transcript, heavily highlighted in yellow ink underneath 5 very specific words. Kennedy didn't even pick the paper up at first. He let it rest openly on the desk, the vibrant yellow ink screaming into the lenses. Slowly, methodically, he removed his half-moon glasses, folded them until the chain swung perfectly still, and set them next to the empty coffee cup. When he finally picked up the transcript, the room grew quieter than it had been all morning. Ma'am, I am going to read you 5 words. They are not my words. They are yours. His voice slowed to an absolute crawl. Some people did something. He let the tragic phrase sit between them like a physical barrier. March 23, 2019. The Council on American Islamic Relations Greater Los Angeles 4th Annual Valley Banquet. The Hilton in Woodland Hills, California. Your speech was 20 minutes long, live streamed directly by Fox News on Facebook to over 1 million viewers. He turned the page. Ma'am, exactly 20 seconds before uttering that line about September 11th, you instructed your audience, and I quote, raise hell, make people uncomfortable. He locked eyes with her. 20 seconds later, you summarized September 11th, 2001, with 5 words. Some people did something. This was the absolute pinnacle of the confrontation. Kennedy's voice remained thoroughly composed, yet heavier than lead. Ma'am, I'm going to name some of those people. He read from a new page. Jane Eileen Clear, 61 years old, from Marshfield, Massachusetts. She was a passenger on American Airlines Flight 11. She was a mother of 3, traveling to attend a wedding in Los Angeles. The room was completely transfixed. Wells Crowther, 24 years old, from Nyack, New York. He worked in the South Tower. He wore a signature red bandana, and he bravely walked back into the burning building 3 separate times to save 18 lives. He did not come back out the fourth time. The cameras pushed in tight on the senator. Frances Harros, 76 years old, from New Jersey. She worked in the North Tower. He placed the paper down flat on the wood, 2,977. That is not some people, ma'am. He took a slow breath. That is 2,977 human beings. They had names. They had children. They had mothers. Kennedy then pulled out a transcript from the September 11th memorial service at Ground Zero in 2019. Ma'am, on the 18th anniversary of the attacks, a man named Nicholas Harros Jr. stood at Ground Zero. He was the grieving son of Frances Harros. He was wearing a T-shirt that prominently displayed your 5 careless words. Kennedy read the son's public rebuke with a slow, mournful cadence. Madam, objectively speaking, we know exactly who and what was done. Why your confusion? Kennedy lowered the paper. On that horrific day, 19 Islamic terrorists, all affiliated with Al-Qaeda, violently murdered over 3,000 innocent people. That, ma'am, is what some people did. Do you have that clear now? Kennedy didn't flinch. Mr. Harros's mother, Frances, was 76. She had loyally worked in the North Tower for 32 years. She was sitting at her desk on the 95th floor when American Airlines Flight 11 struck the structure at 8:46 a.m. She was not killed instantly by the impact. She was killed by the catastrophic collapse of the tower 1 hour and 42 minutes later. He turned another page. During those agonizing 102 minutes, Frances Harros managed to call her son Nicholas from the 95th floor twice. During the second phone call, Nicholas could clearly hear his mother struggling to breathe through the thick, toxic smoke. Kennedy set the devastating timeline down. Mr. Harros has been pleading with this country to remember his mother's name for 25 years. He revealed a copy of the New York Post cover from April 11th, 2019. The front page featured a harrowing photograph of the burning North Tower alongside the blaring headline, Rep. Ilhan Omar, 9/11 was, "Some people did something." Ma'am, the cover of the New York Post prominently featured the burning tomb where Frances Harros was trapped, juxtaposed directly with your 5 words. He stared straight through her. Yes or no? On March 23, 2019, at the Care banquet in California, did you casually describe the September 11th terrorist attacks as "some people did something"? Senator, the full context of that speech was explicitly about American Muslims facing severe discrimination in the aftermath of September 11th. I was speaking directly to a community deeply traumatized by Islamophobia following the horrific New Zealand mosque shootings. Yes or no, ma'am? Senator, the context, yes or no? 7 excruciating seconds passed. The phrase undeniably appears in the speech, yes. Did you utter it in front of a cheering audience of approximately 500 people at a Care banquet? Yes. Was the speech broadcast live to over 1 million people on Facebook? 5 seconds. Yes. Did you explicitly say, just 20 seconds prior, raise hell, make people uncomfortable? Senator, that specific line was regarding yes or no. 9 full seconds ticked away. Yes. And then it happened. The folded white prep card, which had been concealed tightly in her sweating left palm for 53 minutes, slipped. It tumbled softly through the air and landed face up on the wooden bench, directly in front of her. The high-definition broadcast cameras instinctively zoomed in. The messy handwriting was glaringly visible. It was her own handwriting, penned in her kitchen the night before. She had memorized the 3 commands, but now the entire nation could read them. The card read, "Pivot to identity. Don't engage details. If pressed on 9/11, New Zealand mosques. Never name the dead." The hearing room plunged into a profound, suffocating silence. 1 second passed. Her right hand instinctively twitched toward the exposed card, but stopped mid-air. 2 seconds. Her hand fell limply back to the table. 3 seconds. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. 4 seconds. She firmly pressed her lips together. 5 seconds. Desperate for a distraction, she reached for her water glass, lifted it halfway to her face, but quickly set it back down. The water never grazed her lips. 6 seconds. The crisp white headscarf shifted slightly at her temple, but she made no effort to adjust it. 7 seconds. Her frantic eyes scanned the gallery, locking briefly onto Senator Cardin. He was staring at the wall. 8 seconds. She looked desperately toward the Democratic ranking member. The member was entirely focused on her own notes. 9 seconds. She sought out Jeremy Slevin in the wings. He was staring blankly at his lap. 10 seconds. Her lips parted again. Still, absolute silence. 11 seconds. The cameras remained locked on the white card, broadcasting the phrase, "Never name the dead," into millions of American living rooms. In the wings, Jeremy Slevin let his phone screen go black and didn't touch it again. 12 seconds. 13. 14. Kennedy remained perfectly still. Slowly, he picked up his glasses, folded them, and rested them on the bench. He glanced at his empty coffee cup, then moved it aside. Methodically, he closed the 37-page manila folder containing the 4 damning documents. The penciled word receipts was once again visible to the world. "Ma'am," Kennedy began, his voice barely rising above a whisper as he stared pointedly at the white card resting on her table. 2,977 people. Yet, you explicitly wrote, "Never name the dead." He let the disgrace echo in the silent room. "I just named 3. If witnessing a country lawyer systematically honor 3 fallen Americans over a politician's hollow talking points moved you, pay close attention to the final, defining question of this hearing. The prep card remained face up on the desk. The combative smile was completely gone. Kennedy rested his hands on the closed folder. "Ma'am, just one final question." He allowed the tension to stretch for 4 long seconds. "Across $3 million in campaign payments funneled to your husband's firm, across a convoluted Minnesota civil marriage certificate to a man your own friend claimed you called your brother, across a verified tweet about Benjamins, a bookstore rant about foreign allegiance, and a bipartisan House removal vote of 218 to 211, and across 2,977 innocent Americans who were murdered on a crystal-clear Tuesday morning in September of 2001, he let the devastating summary hang in the air. Yes or no, ma'am? Do you owe the United States of America a profound apology?" The room was deathly quiet. Omar's trembling hands rested awkwardly on the bench next to her exposed, handwritten instructions. The microphone eagerly awaited her response. In a final, desperate act of political survival, she tried to play the identity card one last time. Her voice was thin, strained to its breaking point. "Senator, this entire proceeding has been nothing but a blatantly partisan witch hunt orchestrated by a Republican senator from a state that, yes or no, ma'am. This is the oldest playbook in, I'll wait. 1 second. 2, 3, she looked pleadingly at Senator Cardin. He offered nothing. 4, 5, 6, she looked at the Democratic ranking member. Total avoidance. 7, 8. She stared down at her own handwriting. Never name the dead. 9, 10. She cleared her throat softly, a pathetic sound instantly caught by the microphone. "I have apologized many times, Senator," she whispered. "Did you apologize today, ma'am?" 6 seconds vanished. She refused to answer. At the 12th second, Kennedy offered a single, resolute nod. He picked up the manila folder, opened it back to the first document labeled Money, and pushed it firmly across the dais. "Mr. Chairman, I yield the remainder of my time. This folder is officially entered into the congressional record. The country can read every page of it tonight." The chairman swiftly announced a 30-minute recess. The heavy wooden gavel struck the block twice, the sound cracking through the tense air like a gunshot. Omar mechanically stood up. The navy blazer settled awkwardly on her shoulders. She did not retrieve the incriminating prep card. She left her expensive leather notebook behind. She abandoned the half-full water glass. She clumsily grabbed her phone and her water bottle, her hands moving with the distinct uncertainty of someone who has completely lost their bearing. She couldn't bring herself to look at Slevin, at Cardin, at Scott, or at Kennedy. She turned and began the long walk toward the side exit. It was exactly 12 steps, and the broadcast cameras meticulously documented every single one. Step 1. Her left hand was shockingly empty, the card having betrayed her minutes ago. Step 2. The press section was eerily silent. The sympathetic scribbling had ceased. Step 3. The Democratic ranking member remained intently focused downward. Step 4. The DHS investigator in the gallery quietly clicked his own folder shut, the word match secured inside. Step 5. Step 6. The aide who had loyally brought her water was nowhere to be found. Step 7. Step 8. Her right hand briefly brushed the temple of her headscarf, a nervous tick for a garment that hadn't moved. Step 9. Step 10. The journalist simply watched her retreat. Step 11. Step 12. As she reached the heavy oak door, she paused. Kennedy was still sitting calmly at his desk, staring intently at the money document, completely ignoring her departure. "Ma'am," Kennedy stated, his voice quiet but commanding. She froze. "My door remains open anytime. You bring me your verifiable version of these documents, and we will happily go through them line by line, page by page." A brief pause. "The country will wait." She offered no response. She walked out. The manila folder remained open on the senator's desk. The white prep card rested face up, exposing her strategy. The notebook and the water glass sat exactly where she left them. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, not with a violent slam, but with the definitive thud of a chapter closing permanently. By 11:38 a.m., 4 distinct hashtags absolutely dominated every major American social media platform. Number "Some People Did Something," number 3000, names number "Never Name the Dead," and number "Receipts Folder." The agonizing 5.3-second clip of the prep card falling from her grasp amassed an astonishing 78 million views before sundown. The heartbreaking 1.1-second clip of Senator Kennedy reciting the names of the fallen victims skyrocketed to 94 million views. The zoomed-in image of her handwriting, "Never Name the Dead," became the single most shared photograph of the entire day. In Marshfield, Massachusetts, a 61-year-old man, the exact age his mother, Jane Eileen Clear, had been when she boarded Flight 1, watched the footage on his phone. He wept, realizing he hadn't heard his mother's name spoken on national television in over 2 decades. In Nyack, New York, a 46-year-old woman watched the viral clip. She was only 22 when her courageous brother, Wells Crowther, charged back into the collapsing South Tower for the final time. She immediately walked to her mantel and gently touched the framed red bandana that belonged to him. In New Jersey, Nicholas Harris Jr. logged onto his social media account and typed a single, profound sentence. "Today, a senator from Louisiana named my mother after 25 years of silence." By nightfall, that specific sentence became the most widely quoted sentiment on the American internet. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, a retired NYPD officer watched the broadcast from his living room. He had been suffocating in the dust of the South Tower on that fateful Tuesday, managing to drag 4 people to safety before the concrete gave way. For 25 years, he couldn't bear to say his fallen colleagues' names aloud. Tonight, with tears in his eyes, he finally recited them to his wife. She held his hand. She had been waiting a quarter of a century to hear them. At 1:14 p.m., Jeremy Slevin desperately released an official statement on behalf of Representative Omar. It was exactly 11 sentences long. It aggressively used the word partisan 3 times, the phrase Republican witch hunt twice, and the descriptor Muslim woman of color 4 times. It proudly reiterated the phrase raise hell and make people uncomfortable. What her team's hollow statement completely failed to mention was just as telling. It conveniently ignored the $3 million funneled to Tim Minette, the baffling Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi marriage certificate. And most damning of all, it entirely ignored Frances Harros, Jane Eileen Clear, and Wells Crowther. The politician, relentlessly marketed as the fiery conscience of a new generation, had just spent 43 minutes on live television, outright refusing to acknowledge 3 innocent Americans who perished in the worst terrorist attack in the nation's history. This confrontation laid bare the reality of the political establishment. For 7 long years, the Democratic Party fiercely protected a politician whose documented reality sharply contradicted her public persona. They shielded a representative harboring questionable campaign payments, a tangled marriage history, repeated anti-Semitic tropes, and a horrific trivialization of September 11th. Given the stark choice between preserving the political brand of Ilhan Omar and honoring the 2,977 Americans who were murdered, the establishment predictably chose the brand. When the disgraced Congresswoman exited the Hart Building at 12:14 p.m., she climbed into a waiting black SUV. The confused driver circled the Capitol complex aimlessly for 18 minutes before finally asking, "Congresswoman, where to?" She offered absolutely no reply. The driver continued circling in silence. In America today, there is no viable road home for a politician whose own handwritten instructions dictate never name the dead, especially not after a relentless country lawyer ensured those names will never be forgotten. You just witnessed the exact moment a senator methodically opened a folder containing purely her own public record. No fabricated opposition research, just deleted tweets, contradictory marriage certificates, and exact speech transcripts. Faced with the undeniable truth, she completely refused to apologize. Tonight, Madam Congresswoman, the entire country wants you to realize one thing. They watched your prep card fall. They read your handwriting. They saw the instruction to pivot, dodge, and ignore the fallen. The country remembered. Some people did something. 3,000 Americans died. And inside hearing room 219, 3 were finally named. The country will absolutely name the rest, page by page, folder by folder. The folder is wide open. The receipts are public. The country waited 25 years. Madam Congresswoman, it is your turn. The country has the receipts.